Today is Thursday, February 8th, 2024. This is reading Senate Natural Resources and Energy. And we're continuing our work on S213, an act relating to the regulation of wetlands, river corridor development, and dam safety. And we're coming back to a topic that we introduced in the form of looking at Bill H373 on polystyrene foam and its use in flotation. So with that, we did a walkthrough of 373 before. We've had some discussion on it, the hazards related to it, and we wanted to follow up. So, Mr. McCollum, Mr. Sergeant, I don't know how you're always welcome to choose how to provide testimony. If you want to pull two chairs to the table and speak together. Totally.
Thank you, Chair.
Your choice.
Thank you.
So good morning. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Chair Bright and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Pete LaFlamme. I'm Director of the Watershed Management Division at Vermont DEC, and I'm joined today by Deputy Directors.
And Bethany Sargent, Deputy Director with the Watershed Management Division in Vermont DEC.
And we're here today to, as you indicated, Chair Bright, we're here today to provide comment on the section of S213 that involves polystyrene dump floats. And we'll divide our testimony initially into two parts. Bethany will be talking a little bit about the issue in general and what other jurisdictions are doing with this currently. Some of this may be certainly a review based on previous testimony that you've heard on this. And then we'll walk through the elements, not a line by line walkthrough, but walk through the elements of the proposed addition to 213 and give you our agency comments on that.
And sorry to interrupt, just for anyone who's following remotely, if you look at our draft 2.1 from 2524, there are new sections beginning with section 13 that address what we're about to discuss here.
So as I think the committee has been aware of via testimony from last week from the Rosalia Project, from the Conservation Law Foundation about the issue of non-enclosed or non-encapsulated polystyrene foam, and then also polystyrene bead that is encapsulated. Obviously, when it's exposed to the elements used in docks or in buoys or other flotation devices, it can break down into small pieces where, we are aware of this issue as well. It can impact aquatic biota and wildlife. It can impact aesthetics because it stays in the environment. And so, obviously the addition of this to 213 seeks to remediate that through, which people talk about both a ban on the sale of it as well as prohibition of the use of it. I am aware of several states that have prohibited the sale and distribution of it. There are a number of local ordinances that also, prohibit the ongoing use of it. So they may not grandfather it in to be, enforced by local, code enforcement officers. And so obviously, we are supportive of the intent of the legislation and reducing the, the use of these materials that do stay in environment and have, impact our environment. But, Pete will walk through some of those elements that, that we're concerned about within the proposed legislation in terms of some of the enforcement capacity, the way that it's proposed now.
Can I ask a quick science refresher on this? My recollection from other polystyrene work we did a few years ago, like on food containers, is that there's nothing in nature that actually decomposes them all the way. They just become invisible to the naked eye because they turn into smaller and smaller pieces, but they're persistent in the environment.
That's correct.
So walking through generally the concepts being proposed in S213, the new section of S213, the agency feels that we should work to phase this material out. As Stephanie has said, as other testimony has presented, it's not a good, it's not good in the environment. It breaks down into chunks that are, ingested by wildlife. It breaks down into microplastics. We should phase the use of this out. And so the agency does agree with the proposed ban on sale of new polystyrene dock floats. We agree with the concept of not allowing its use in new installations. And we feel like phasing this out through a education and outreach campaign to inform people about the perils of ongoing use of it in dock systems is an important thing. We can partner with lake associations, we can boost outreach and education material. We're not sure right now the extent of the problem. Part of it may be inventorying existing dock systems to determine the extent of the problem, and then perhaps eventually coming up with a funding source to assist in the removal and replacement of this with either encapsulated polystyrene products or use of other materials that are less troublesome in terms of their long-term use and maintenance.
So just make sure, kind of think of the different sort of things that could happen out there. So agreeing with the ban on the sale of new materials, so that we're not adding anymore. And how about when it gets used in repairs? So an existing dock, but they've lost location or became waterlogged or who knows what, but now they decide they want to replace what they have. Are you thinking it would be okay to go replace like with an existing dock, or if you're repairing, you should also not put raw polystyrene blocks out again?
We feel like if you ban the sale of it, then that would then eliminate the use of it if you needed to purchase, if your dock needed additional flotation because of the deterioration of the existing, if it wasn't available for sale, then that would accomplish that.
I'm imagining so when I'm not here the last 3 years, I've been doing buildings and put a lot of polystyrene like around foundation, which I wrote to foam. So widely available at lumber yards and just so I'm just trying to think through, practically speaking, how a ban works if someone's going to think about it as a dock application, or someone cuts very easily with the right tool. Sheet cut it, and there were some pictures we saw of it sort of sliced like someone like deli slice, and then they stacked them, and then they became a block. So if you thought about that whole way that this could continue despite a ban on sale or use as location.
Right. It's a good point you raised here, right? We can certainly consider that. I think the biggest obstacle for the agency right now would be taking on responsibility for compliance and enforcement efforts with this, along with the many other things that we are currently working on implementing. And from our Lakes and Ponds program, we have a number of different priorities that we're pushing forward right now, a number of important issues that we're dealing with lakes, and this would be, we as important as this issue is, we don't want to reprioritize away from some of our other initiatives, be it wake boat regulation and implementation of wake boat regulation, be it development of watershed action plans, be it the control of cyanobacteria and use valve application. There are a number of other priorities that we're dealing with right now. And so we feel like education and outreach around this issue is really an important first step along with that initial ban. As to the specific issue you just raised, Chair Bray, it's a very good point, and we can consider that. But again, we don't want to divert compliance and enforcement regulation or initiatives are away from what we're currently working on.
Right. I think last time we were all talked together, I think we were trying to be supportive of your efforts to do weekly.
Right, right.
Ongoing.
Right, we really appreciated the actions of the committee and the chair last year on that effort. As you know, we're still hopeful and still working on that, but that's an enormous, incredibly important initiative that we would like to move forward on.
Finley.
Oh, thank you, Chair Bray. So I have, I know you were gonna potentially walk through the language a little.
I
bit with
wasn't,
us.
I mean, we can walk through line by line, but no, I was planning on testifying more about just general concepts where.
Okay, so there's not something specific that you're like, we would strike this section to get at what our goals are.
We support the ban of the sale and the ban of installation. And then also lean heavily on education and outreach, inventorying, and then, eventually moving towards replacement of existing, perhaps with a funding source to assist in that.
So really the only section that you would be against, if I'm understanding correctly, would be the removal from water piece.
Would be the ban of existing.
Use.
Okay,
Ban of use, yes.
the ban of use, okay, so that's helpful. So knowing that, I guess what, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us about this topic.
Thank you for bringing it down.
Yeah, but I guess my confusion is why would it take more time to, like, why would education outreach be less time for you than to actually just implement it? It feels like education and outreach is actually usually the thing that's the longest, because your outcome that you want is, hey, don't do this.
Right,
There may,
So-
if I could speak to that, there may be, I guess it may take a longer time frame in terms of, getting that action, but you're able to do it to scale. So if you're targeting, specific outreach and education, rather than having it be a one-on-one interaction, knowing that, someone has an existing use of, these materials in their dock, developing an outreach campaign targeting at shoreland owners and being able to, provide those materials all at once, and that education and outreach, with the specific and, the same goals, but it's sort of an effort to scale versus having it be more of a one-on-one compliance interaction.
Okay.
That compliance and enforcement action is incredibly labor intensive, where you have to identify the owner, you have to then take action against that particular owner. And there's as you know, there's an extensive enforcement process around one individual dock, and then moving that way through the state. Again, we're not sure how many of these installations there are, but we suspect that they're, if not common, at least there's a moderate use of them out there, so it would be a lot of individual effort. Each of our compliance and enforcement actions that we take, regardless of the particular issue we're facing, are incredibly labor intensive.
So how many, okay, that's interesting, I guess what I really agree, that's a good point. So your compliance folks and your outreach people are separate. It's different staffers.
Yes.
There can be the same goals in terms of eventually that's, sort of achieving outreach is designed to achieve volunteer compliance. Enforcement, can on an individual basis take a long time as well, but it's much more labor intensive. And so your ultimate goals between outreach and education and enforcement can be compliance with existing regulations. It's just a different strategy and different process.
But it's the same people doing the work.
No, I
Oh,
mean, we have a separate division
Okay.
that, our environmental compliance division, they are divided into those two parts. They have a education and outreach component, and then we also have our environmental enforcement officers in a separate section within that different division. In our division, in the Lakes and Ponds program, we have combined education and outreach and compliance and enforcement within the same program.
Yeah, that's.
Sometimes it's the same person.
Okay, that's.
I mean, when we're talking about 2 or 3 people.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm
Yeah.
trying to get at, it's confusing to me because it feels like we're talking about a very small group of people
Very, yes.
who kind of already are out talking to people
Right,
They
about.
are.
and they can provide
And
those,
it feels like, couldn't they just say, look at that dock over there? That's not compliance, when they're already going out, like as the list of things that they have to talk to, they're not gonna need to go out specifically for each of those docks.
If we outright ban the ongoing use of it, they would need to do that.
So versus what they do now, which is where they're, from my understanding, already going out.
They go out to look at sites for lake-wide restoration, so that's a voluntary effort, so they may be out looking at a particular site for that work. They go out if there's a proposed permit, either a shoreline
Yeah.
permit or an encroachment permit, but again, that's on a site-by-site basis. They go to one property on the lake. And if that one property happened to have polystyrene dock floats, they could talk about, they could do that outreach and education.
But they wouldn't in this instance
To
be able to.
initiate enforcement, they would have to observe that, they would have to do extensive documentation, they would come back, we would produce a notice of alleged violation. We'd have to issue that notice of alleged violation, that would have to contain conditions, performance requirements within it. If they didn't follow those performance requirements, then we would have to initiate formal enforcement, which then involves attorneys, it involves quite an extensive process. As you
Yeah.
know. So what we're saying, I guess, is that by standing up a broad education and outreach campaign, we could partner with lake associations, we could partner with statewide groups to really get the word out there. To encourage voluntary compliance works a lot better than individual enforcement actions. So,
But what-
that would be a backstop eventually.
Yeah, so what date would you say that you would have had enough time to, make the case and do, because you're gonna be out there, you're gonna be talking to people already, hand them a flyer saying that stuff is bad.
Mhm.
That seems great, but you can't enforce it. So would you feel comfortable if we said, hey, in 3 years, these are not going to be allowed in Vermont waters anymore, but for the next 3 years, when you're talking to people, you can do it. You can do your outreach.
I'd say that our current level of understanding is not that extensive as to the extent of the problem. So I'd say that would be a good second level of effort. I don't know about supporting it currently.
Stella,
Well, that was gonna be my question,
Yeah.
actually, it was. If the ban on use was. 3 years out, 5 years out, so time to do the education with a run up to, with it, knowing that like, hey, this is gonna change.
Mhm.
And you have some time to make the adjustments
Mhm.
as necessary. It sounds like you are not in favor of even that kind of.
Yeah, that's my confusion.
It's
It
without,
feels premature
Okay.
at this point.
and without knowing to Pete's point, the extent of the issue, the availability of alternative materials, the cost of those alternative materials, it's hard to be able to pick a date certain that would allow for that phased approach.
And when that date occurs, there's gonna be a tremendous demand on
Yeah.
staff to do that work.
Mhm.
So
so when it becomes a blanket law, they're being, even pre-existing uses now have to be discontinued, so needs to replace. Does that mean that you end up, if you go visit a lake, you end up with an obligation, not to just visit a single site, but now you have to tour the whole lake, because you have to do, I don't know, even-handed enforcement, so if you're gonna, you gotta get out and check every dock in a lake or something like that.
the even-handed enforcement issue does come up, especially when you're choosing one, we're going after your dock. Where your neighbor's docks contain the same material, so no, it could take on a fairly intensive life of its own. Depending, again, we don't know if lakes have one such installation or dozens. Finding that information out would be important, because regardless if it's today or if it's in 3 or 5 years, it still is an incredible obligation on the agency and on the department to division the program. And we're juggling a lot of competing priorities right now, and some of those priorities currently are higher on the list than this issue.
Anything that we didn't get to that, well, there's a rulemaking involved in here, even if we're to ban the use going forward, or use in repair. So, let me go back, just make sure I have those clear in my head. Seems pretty straightforward to say use going forward.
Yes.
And how about use in repair of existing docks? If it were not allowed, unencapsulated, was not allowed there, is that seem like a problematic? If that's advanced?
Again, it seems, Chair Wright, it seems like we're teetering on the edge of compliance and enforcement efforts there. If an individual chose to go out and do those repairs with, repurposing the concept of foundation insulation as a way of floating their dock. Then it becomes a compliance and enforcement effort. As to the question you had about rulemaking, it's our understanding based on our reading that the secretary may.
Right.
So it enables the secretary to use that tool, and I would say that would probably be the appropriate place for those sorts of considerations, the repair considerations, eventual phasing out of this material, because then we could index it with our existing priorities and our existing workloads, frankly.
There have challenge? General comment.
Do we have a time period? A date in the future at which all this stuff will be going? Does the bill call for a future moment when all?
I think the bill calls for a date for banning it. That date is fairly soon, and then the actual elimination of it through the implementation of that ban would be the subject of compliance.
The ban is on new uses installed.
It's our understanding there's also a requirement for removal of existing.
Oh, okay.
And if I'm understanding correctly, you're in favor of everything but the removal.
Correct. Well, I would say it slightly differently, Senator White. We're in favor of banning, if moving forward, eliminating the sale and installation of new. We certainly will take a closer look at the repair issue in terms of outlawing the existing. We are concerned about that for several reasons.
Mainly staffing and
Staffing and then also rolling this program out. We feel like that sort of an effort should be preceded by by a voluntary campaign through education and outreach to have people voluntarily plan to eliminate this material from their towns.
I think that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate your perspective. And you're behind the vision of this.
Yes.
And I think
Yes,
that that's
absolutely.
kind of where I sit, and I understand your priorities and how strapped you are, and I hope you know that this committee feels that, and has advocated for more staffing. So that's an angle to this, but it feels disappointing to me that we are rubbing up against this so constantly when it comes to environmental protections, especially when you know the problems that we're facing with this. And we know the problems, and the issue seems to come down time and time again to lack of staffing, and you're not, as a division, able to advocate for more staffing with the budgetary constraints that you have. So for me, after this conversation, it feels like I'm comfortable with the banning of the sale and new, maybe the repair conversation needs to be one that we spend more time on, but I'd like to keep this in the bill and then look at having the ban start if we can at like a date certain. Maybe not this year, because I do think you make a good point. If there's a way that we can educate people, they can voluntarily do that in like in a year or 2 year period.
Okay, thank you. Sarah McCormick.
Just to verify that I understand, I think I heard it. You count replacement in the category of new.
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at that more carefully in terms of how that, are they replacing it in kind? Are they expanding their dock and replacing and adding to it at the same time? And I think, evaluating how that indexes with our encroachment regulations and whether or not that's something that could be considered in that context.
So why are you not expanding, just I've got an existing facility there, it's breaking apart. Not working, I've got to replace, I've got to put a new one, new,
There's that word.
So the idea is that I would not be using this stuff, but looking for.
It would not be available for use that way. I mean, again, if we, you know, to, Chair Brady's point, though, someone could attempt to repurpose, basement insulation, in that way, so. We'll have to work on that detail. It's a good point, Senator McCormick, and we'll have to work on that.
And you mentioned, you say that you would not want to be in the business of enforcing a prohibition on existing.
Correct.
And you mentioned just that you don't have the staff.
And we have many competing priorities, the Senator White's comments a few moments ago. It's a function both of existing staff, but then it's also a function of just mushrooming issues. You know, we're dealing with so many new and different issues, be it weight boat, be it PFAS, be it, you know, use of alum to control cyanobacteria in several lakes that we're looking at right now, be it in terms of trying to reclassify our most pristine waters and the efforts necessary there. There are a number of different initiatives that we're wrestling with right now, in addition to ongoing compliance and enforcement efforts with shoreline management, with encroachment issues, with discharges. There, you know, the issues are multiplying rapidly, and they're all important issues, and we, you know, we do our best to prioritize where we feel like the best return on investment in terms of overall water quality in the state and environmental protection are. So
In a perfect world,
in a perfect world,
if you had more staff, you would do this.
right, but you know, the number of staff needed to do all of those things well, in addition to other initiatives as well, quickly become very, very difficult to support in the long term. And I understand that.
Good morning.
Well, every year in Woodstock on the Outer Beach, there's a rat race. And a lot of those folks use old milk jugs. And it's higher. That's not, I'm loaded by it.
See, you recycle it.
Yeah, like,
Right.
it's not recycling, it's reuse.
There you go.
Milk jug armada.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we had a state checkbook in here, we would be writing a lot of checks to A and R, like. Do more things
A lot.
that everyone would agree we would like to,
It should be.
in terms of outreach, I'm guessing, so this is not a lead question, I should do that. But I'm hopeful that you have relationships with many lake associations already, so. When we've talked about boat walkers in the past and things like that, but there'll be a way of. Getting the word out, and it seems like a lot of lake associations are serious about their commitments to the water quality.
They are, yeah, we partner well with various lake associations, and we're excellent partners with the Federation of Vermont Lakes and Ponds. In terms of, you know, helping to amplify our outreach messages and work with lake associations specifically. We also, through our lay monitoring program, work with shoreline owners on an individual basis or individuals who are interested in stewarding their lake and collecting water quality data through the summer months. And so we have well-developed relationships with shoreline owners and with the, excuse me, the lake association that members of. So I feel we have great partners to be able to conduct such an outreach campaign, as well as some of the other organizations in the state that, you know, that do outreach and education focused on water quality issues.
Any other questions for Bob or? It's,
I think this is not really a question, I just want to observe that in our language. The use of unencapsulated floating devices is non-conforming as of 2026.
Oh,
And thereafter is subject to enforcement and removal.
first,
So there is
sometime,
there's some built.
yeah,
Just observing that.
2026 date is all too soon.
It, regardless of that date, depending on the extent, if there were only two non-encapsulated polystyrene dock floats left in the state, we could certainly handle it. If there were dozens or hundreds, it's going to be a major work item at that time as well. So I think, again, the reluctance on our part to specify a particular date is going to depend a lot, frankly, on our education and outreach, on our inventorying, under our better understanding of the extent of the problem. Because if suddenly in 2026, we're going, there are hundreds of these things we need to go after, knowing the workload associated with any individual compliance effort, it would overwhelm us.
Well, and you raised the point of what are the alternatives and how available are they? I've heard anecdotally, we have trouble getting witness who's in the business of doing docks to provide testimony, we'll keep after it. But that when the initial inquiry went to them to talk about this issue, they said, we thought they were already banned, we haven't told that for 15 years. They've been doing encapsulated homes, so. It could be that many of the professionals who are doing it are
Already.
already doing it,
Yeah.
so that would be good news, so.
Yeah.
I'm asking here for kind of soft data,
Mhm.
okay? Which is, what is your impression of boat operators, dock owners, sellers, all the people who this will apply to? Sometimes when we try to do something with, the attitude is, oh, those liberals in Montpelier are taking away our rights and they're imposing their agenda on us. Other times, and I see this with things like lakefront owners, which is, yeah, we want to take care of this lake.
Right.
It's why we bought a house here, we
Yeah.
like this lake, and they're looking to the state as a partner. You get a lot of hostility, or you get,
It's a great question, Senator McCormick, and I agree with you. We do see that broad spectrum of reaction. But your second point that you made as to lakeshore owners and the care with which they regard their individual lakes, I'm really hopeful that in this effort, that having that education and outreach material will, in addition to, frankly, some peer pressure. We've seen peer pressure work well in terms of our Lakewise implementation program, where we work with individual property owners and they do a number of different things to minimize their effect on the lake as a result of the way they manage their property. And it's a retrofit type program. And when one person on a lake does that, or two people on a lake, or three people, that momentum really swells and goes around the lake, because these folks, they value their lake and they want to do the right thing in terms of protecting it long term. So I'm really hopeful that the education and outreach, and again, we could look at that a couple of years down the road and see how that's all working. We could build an element to Senator White's point, when we are out there, we could build an element into our Lakewise outreach around this as well. That in addition to looking at their septic system and not mowing and fertilizing down to the edge of the water, maintaining a riparian buffer, all of those different things, we could add this as well to that list of items. And then, again, that sort of the peer pressure, frankly, the sociology around, keeping up with the neighbors in terms of doing the right thing could well take hold. That's what we're hopeful. That is a much better path forward, we feel, than the compliance and enforcement path, for a couple of different reasons, frankly.
well, of course, you can do it all. I mean, we can do the compliance and enforcement.
Right.
when
That
we
could be an
can,
eventuality.
If it comes, I think letterhead has power.
For
First letterhead, people
Right,
want to be
right.
law abiding.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And the other thing is, this would show up in a title search.
Oh,
What?
I don't know that it would.
We're out of compliance,
Certain provisions do show up as a cloud on the title. I'm not an attorney. I don't know if this would or not, but we could certainly ask that question of our attorneys. I'm thinking that it probably wouldn't, but again. I'm definitely not an
what I'm
attorney.
saying is, I think there's a lot short of the dock police coming in.
That's absolutely right. And I guess that you summarized well our testimony.
Yeah.
That we feel like we should try other avenues first, again, for several. different
But
reasons.
since we do have a date, I'd leave the date.
Yeah.
See what we can do before then, and then take it up when that time comes.
Yeah, and
Really?
thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you feel, I mean, let's say you did an inventory or you had time and you're doing the outreach and you realize, holy smokes, this is a huge issue, and we've got hundreds of these. Next session, you could always come and inform us of that and say, hey, you know, we're gonna have to push this out another year, we just do not have the ability. And that would give me some, that would give us some information about how serious of an issue is. I have an expectation, and this is from personal experience on our river, which you would not be dealing with, but the Connecticut River, very few people have this situation, and the people who are remaining and having these situations just don't necessarily know, like they're not,
Right.
they're not aware,
That's
so the small instances where I think it is happening, having that kind of stick to say, and you know what, in the future, this is gonna be not allowed, I think would give you a further ability to make the case when you're there. And if you found that it was a small group of people and it was manageable, 2026 we could keep, but you could always come back and say, this, we found a giant problem unexpectedly. That we might need to delay the actual enforcement of.
I understand your point, Senator White. I'm coming at it from the opposite angle where I would prefer to come back in and say we do need the enforcement capability. As opposed to having that date in there right now, because again, I know I sound like a broken record in my testimony, but where, I have real concerns about having to pivot away from some of our other initiatives to the enforcement of this, and I feel strongly some of our other priorities are, more important at this point. Frankly.
I can understand how you could see the wall of 2026 coming, and it might not feel reassuring to you in 2023 to say, we'll worry about that wall when we get closer to it. All right, so anything else you want to share with us?
Thank you, Chair Bray.
All right, thanks so much good to see you, and thank you for coming back. Are you gonna be able to stay with us, or are you heading out? I'm just thinking we have folks to provide some responses to your, and we are trying to close the bill out. So if you're able to stick around with
Yeah.
Happy to say, thank you, Senator.
you know, sometimes towards the end stage of a bill like now, well, even though this piece is new, discussion with people in the room is way faster than testimony just in sequence over days.
I agree, and I appreciate that. We're happy to say.
Okay,
Sure,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Parting shot, when they talk about time,
Yeah,
this stuff breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces over time.
Correct.
And it seems to me that the bigger hunks are less of a problem than the little ones.
From a litter and a wildlife perspective.
For management.
maybe, yeah,
You can get a bunch of volunteers out to clean up the riverbank and pick up hunks. When you start getting into the little, tiny
Right.
little. How do you manage,
Micro.
when we had testimony, they
Right.
don't,
right,
and it's unmanageable.
that's correct.
And once it becomes microscopic,
Right,
which means you wanna get this taken care of as quickly as possible.
There are many sources for microplastics. This is certainly one of those. So yes, and again, I just. In a perfect world, as you said earlier, Senator McCormick, we'd be doing everything everywhere all at once, but.
like no longer washing any garments.
Right. right,
What garments?
Please, polar please, all that
which
stuff.
produce, yeah.
Oh, the microplastics.
You're right, it all breaks
Wow.
down into microplastics.
They shed plastics during the wash cycle and then they flush out.
And they break down smaller
We're
and
gonna
smaller.
work
It's
a lot
a,
of
it's an
dirtier
enormous.
clothes in the future.
No micro police, I guess.
Let's go watch it.
Okay. Whoa.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Next thing you know, you liberals will be banning opium.
Yes.
We have already.
Yeah.
Micro opening, that's what I'm worried about. Miss Provost is not available, is that still true?
Yes.
Okay, so Doc Doctors is a very active group, business, does doc work in Vermont, New York, they're based in Ferrisburg. Can you give them a call and see if we can get them to help us out with some testimony?
Mr. Chair, we also do have someone who sells docks in our district that I'd be happy to
Great.
as well. It sounded like you had somebody, but I'm happy to connect.
It had someone, but we haven't been able to get them to say yes. So, yeah, if you could give Judy name, that'd be great. And just one, and with that, so let's move on to Ms. Sullivan. Good morning. How are you? If you could just introduce yourself for the record and then talk to us about the expanded polystyrofoam sections. I think, as I understand it, that's what you're here to discuss with the committee, yes?
That is true. Thank you for having me. Good morning, Chairman Gray.
Good morning. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I also have some slides. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to share my screen.
If you're getting it, do that right now.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Can everyone see this okay?
Looks great, thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Bray, and other committee members. My name is Ashley Sullivan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Rosalia Project. We are a Vermont-based nonprofit that's working on the problem of marine debris here in Vermont in our local rivers, lakes, and ultimately our ocean. Marine debris is defined by NOAA as any persistent solid material that's manufactured or processed and directly or indirectly, intentionally or unintentionally disposed of or abandoned into our marine environment. Our organization has been recovering and collecting data on marine debris here in Vermont since 2012. And I have been at the helm of this organization since 2017. So I'm here today to share with you what we have documented and what we've learned regarding unencapsulated polystyrene, which for these purposes, we're referring to it as dock foam, that is found in the marine environment here in Vermont. And from 2012 to 2023, we have run 556 cleanups here in Vermont throughout 17 different locations around the state, which include the White River, the Otter Creek, the Winooski River, Lamoille River, and also the shores throughout Lake Champlain. From all of these locations, we have removed in total over 87,000 pieces of foam. And they range from sizes, 4 feet by 2 feet foam blocks to the tiniest grains of sand. This is a photo of dock foam on the shores of Letty Park, which is on Lake Champlain from November 2022. And you can see that these foam spheres are extremely small. We've cataloged over 150 individual items from bottle caps to food wrappers, and foam is the #2 item that we have recovered in our public waterways here in Vermont. And the first, not surprising, not too far ahead, is microplastics. You can see here that this is in Burlington Harbor inside the U.S. Coast Guard basin from November in 2022. And the photo really demonstrates that even, modern constructed docks can fail in weather events. And you can see this is a concrete on the top with an encapsulation underneath that has been compromised because of a weather event. And now this is there. These small pieces of foam are exposed. So here's a look at our data, and you can see that, this just demonstrates all of the cleanups that we participated over the past decade And you can see that, microfoams and microplastics are pretty much neck and neck, with 93,000 microplastics and 87,000 microfoams.
Can I just ask quick, so when you say microplastics, what would I be seeing that you're categorizing as a microplastic?
So a microplastic is anything that is under 5 millimeters. So if you kind of look at your pinky nail, for example, and then kind of cut that in half, microplastics are extremely small, like about the size of a grain of rice or smaller. And so I'm differentiating here between like a hard plastic or a film piece of plastic versus a foam. They're two different, different textures.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And here in the bottom right, what you'll see is kind of a breakdown of what those 87,000 pieces of foam actually make up. So 36,000 pieces were large foam, which is defined as larger than 30 millimeters, which is bigger than a size of a quarter. So it can be bigger than a quarter, and up to, a huge foam block, for example. 14,000 of those pieces are small foam, which is defined as between 5 and 30 millimeters. And 36,000 pieces of microfoam, which is been identified as smaller than 5 millimeters, so smaller than a grain of rice. Move on to the next slide. The rate of accumulation of the foam in our waterways is increasing throughout the years. So the microfoams represent the red color, and the blue is microplastics. And, a possible result of this is our changing climate. So with every flood, the problem of foam and other debris is exacerbated. This is evident in the documentation of photos and data, that I'm providing today, as well as that you have seen from the Conservation Law Foundation. The unpredictable and extreme weather we have experienced since we began collecting data after Hurricane Irene in 2011, it is clear that this problem is getting worse, not better. I live in Burlington, Vermont, near Letty Park, which is on the shores of Lake Champlain. And on any given day, I can walk down to that shoreline and find dock foam on any given day. And once this foam enters the natural environment, it's nearly impossible to remove it at mass. And the chemical makeup of unencapsulated polystyrene is such that it will be around forever. The good news is it doesn't have to be this way, and you can make a difference too. I'm strongly recommending that you include language from H373 within the Climate Resilience Bill S213. This has been a long-standing issue, and it should have been addressed years ago and can seamlessly be integrated into S213. Many commercial dock owners and individuals have already begun to change out to more robust and environmentally friendly types of dock, but it's not happening fast enough. And this legislation would ensure Vermonters are all in with improving water quality by eliminating the use of unencapsulated foam docks and buoys. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I have a quick question. The name of your project, what's Rosalia?
Rosalia is the name of our founder, Rachel Miller's great-grandmother.
It's not Latin for microplastics.
Yeah, force to be reckoned with, maybe like my great-grandmother.
She certainly was.
Okay, well, thank you. You've heard some of the conversation so far this morning. about the concerns over being able to enforce, so, there's, discussion is, or I think, around the notion of sort of rolling things out over time, and do you have any response to that?
Well, I can say that voluntary programs have yet to accomplish, getting this foam out of our environment. We had both, I think, the National Park Service in the mid-90s, as well as NOAA has a Clean Marinas program that they've had implemented since 1997. That federally has had this voluntary ban on unencapsulated foam docks. And those voluntary programs are, in my opinion, not successful.
So I'm making notes that I didn't realize this, maybe we already heard it. There's been a voluntary ban on the use of unencapsulated foam since 1997. So is that-
1997,
they were
I-
selling it as float. I'm just trying to sort out who heard what,
That is-
we're trying to figure out how the degree to which lake associations and others like your organization might help spread the word.
The good news is that this is a low-hanging fruit for marine debris here in Lake Champlain. And there has been, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, significant funding around the area of marine debris that is coming into this state through Sea Grant right now. Julie and I are actively working on a proposal, Julie, the Lakekeeper Conservation Law Foundation, and others, organizations that are working on an outreach and education project around foam.
Okay.
And the communities that it impacts, but we don't, we're working on the proposal now for a grant. We may not.
Sure, and I don't know if you've worked with any people in the business of creating docks and floats and rafts and all that stuff. We have any kind of sense, I know this is just anecdotal, we're gonna take more testimony, but how many businesses are already avoiding unencapsulated foam? Or if you get pushback, like, most of my customers choose the cheaper foam than the unencapsulated stuff. Trying to get a read on what's going on out there for people doing this work.
Yeah, anecdotally, I would say that most commercial dock companies that are selling docks right now are selling capsulated foam docks.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Sullivan? All right, well, thank you for your work and thank you for joining us. You're welcome to stay on. We're gonna keep on discussing this for a little while.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Great.
Thank you for your cleanup.
What's that?
The amount of cleanup they've done, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's very hard to get this stuff up. I mean, so I'm exposed to it on job sites. When you have cut panels, you make
You get the little,
an incredible membrane.
Right.
it's like in your eyes and your nose.
And then the only way to try to manage them is to literally vacuum. Spread all the stuff up. And that means I was going around outside on the lawn, around the edges of building, vacuuming the lawn, trying to get this stuff out.
You're a contractor, I would hire.
We're using it for nice, not a saw.
Well, they do have heat things for cutting them, and then you make smoke that is probably not the best thing to be inhaling either.
We should stop.
But yeah, a good red nights worth.
So just a thought.
All right, so I don't know if you folks were helping us before. Do you want to you've heard the discussion? We're trying to sort out a best path forward. I don't know if you have any comments based on the testimony you heard this morning. If you just reintroduce yourself on the record, you want to join us at the table, or if you can, well, you can weigh in from the sidelines.
Sure.
But we're just trying to sort it out. Yeah. on the shoreline.
Thank you, Chair Gray, members of the committee. For the record, Mason Overstreet, staff attorney with Conservation Law Foundation. Our recommendation here would be, I have spoken with folks from the agency, with Pete and Bethany. I was actually just communicating with Associate General Counsel Hannah Smith, attorney at DEC. And I think our recommendation for the committee, if it would be okay with the committee, is that based on the agency's position and some of the staff and enforcement limitations, I think what we could do is put together a proposal for this committee to review by tomorrow. So essentially a markup of the draft language in S213, which would be a compromise, which we believe would be a win-win between the agency, the advocacy community, et cetera. And we've taken detailed notes on the committee's concerns and questions. And so I personally see a good path forward, but as opposed to, even though we've done this in the past with things like anti-neg, I prefer not to do a markup right now.
Sure.
If that's okay.
Yeah, we have a little time, like 12 minutes, no worries.
Right. We could do that. I just think as with all things in life, this one, I think we should carefully think through and get it right,
Yeah.
you know, but I see a good solution personally.
Well, I'm really disappointed. So once again, you're really difficult. So thank you. So that sounds, how's that sound to me? I mean, that's no surprise. That's usually our best path forward. That different people with different roles in the whole thing get together and come up with a compromise language that works all the way around. And Sarah McCormick's gonna tell me I'm too much of a looking for too much reconciliation, but
That's so nice.
it's so nice, too nice. All right, so with that, thank you.
Thank
And thanks so much for coming in. Good to see you again.
Right.
We look forward to seeing new language tomorrow. So we have a little break. Oh, good. You know.
Thank you for coming in. Yeah.
You're in the way.
No, we see the white river right there, but
We
you.
just-
Oh, right. No, you don't know anything about it.
I know.
Well, we do. I mean, even though it's truly ample river to the high water mark on the Vermont side, we do partner well with the.
Be fair, we do want to thank.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Our library over.
Well, thank you.
Great.
Good to see you again. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you
But
very
you're,
much.
but how do you feel about
Yeah, I
the?
appreciate it. We're still with you.
Oh, are we sure?
One have to wish.
We are.
Both still lost.
We're not, but
Uh,
you should that.
Please,
Thank you.
see you all.
Yeah, you